Welcome to the Prodigal and the Priest podcast, a podcast about faith, sports, and two friends from different cultures. Here are your hosts, Joey Scansella and Father Paul Bechter.
Father Paul, what's up?
Joey,
how's it going?
Why don't we have like a clap track or some applause or something cheering us in? Like we've got the guitar, yeah, something like that. Like right at the end of the intro.
Like film before a live studio audience or something
exactly.
like that.
Yeah, during COVID.
In the reception room at St. Anne's.
Getting shifted around every other week because we're under heavy construction here.
Are you cold? You're in like a peacoat and right? That's a peacoat? It's just a long one.
Maybe. Yeah, it's a long coat.
Yeah. I think actually it's a peacoat.
A trench coat?
No, a trench is a different type of material.
Oh, it's a material thing.
Yeah, I think it's a peacoat with a scarf on right now.
Yeah, I like the scarf. Sorry. I forgot to put on my hat. Realized my head was cold. I like the scarf. I like this whole getup. No, I'm not particularly cold to answer your question. But I was just wearing it because it's cold outside.
Still rocking the...
Yeah. And with this hat, like, I really do I feel more like Luigi wearing the hat, I have to say.
So it's funny, when I had the mustache, which we didn't talk about for a week, and then I couldn't take it the way that I just felt weird and awkward having one on my face.
Yeah, how I feel all the time.
Yeah. But you're kind of used to that, wearing a cassock, already having a massive beard. Anyway, all that. Somebody's like, oh, now we got Luigi. So it's funny that you say you identified as Luigi. Wouldn't you say you identified as Mario?
Well, I mean, I think I would prefer to be Mario, but if it's the two of us, like, I think I look more like Luigi with the hat and everything.
Don't they both have a hat?
Yeah, they both have a hat. I don't know, man.
There you go. Well,
I just know I wouldn't. Played golf yesterday, even though it was cold and rainy and stuff. And the guy at the counter when he checked me in was like, man, I wish I were half the man you are wearing that mustache like that. I was like, you could be.
You could.
You could be.
Did he have any facial hair?
Nah. So maybe he couldn't be. I don't know.
There you go.
But it gets comments. Yeah.
Yeah.
Keeps it fun.
So before we go into a heavy topic today that I want as like our topic, I just want to talk NFL football for 1 second here, because we have both our teams won last week, right? The Cowboys beat the Bengals, and the Eagles beat the Saints.
Yeah, they did.
Like kind of
amazing.
Took it to them. And now there's this whole thing about Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
Which is really tough for me as an Eagles fan, because Carson Wentz is kind of an authentic guy and a good guy.
Sure.
As much as we know about him.
Yeah.
But
no, he seems like a really stand-up guy, and like
he's actually
he had a couple
into
seasons
his
where
Christian
he was amazing,
faith.
And yeah.
Yeah, apparently he did a Bible study with different players, like him and Ertz and some different people on the team do a weekly Bible study and different things like that. And so I'm very torn I want somebody to win the NFC East with a winning record. But if the Eagles win out, they don't have a winning record. I don't know if the Cowboys do. Would
no,
they?
we wouldn't.
Yeah. Are they 7 losses or 8?
Oh, gosh, I don't know.
I don't know. But it's just interesting as it draws to a close. I mean, do you see the NFL going to a bubble system for the playoffs?
I've been wondering that. Like, I kind of thought they should have done a bubble for the whole season because it works so well for the NBA.
Right.
And I get that, I don't know, there's much larger team rosters and personnel rosters and stuff like that. But I have done zero research on this, but I think more than an NBA bubble, I could see them doing like an MLB type, like Bubble City thing.
For the playoffs.
Yeah, for the playoffs.
Yeah. Especially when certain cities are allowing fans and certain ones
like
aren't.
Dallas.
Right. Dallas. I saw last night the Cleveland Browns game. There was fans there. Houston Texans. But like, imagine you're the top seed. Imagine the Rams are the top seed.
Mm-hmm.
They're not allowed fans. Heck, if the 49ers played the playoffs and had a home game, they're not even allowed right now to play in their home stadium because of restrictions. So I'm like, how does that all work? I don't know. It's just intriguing. So I could talk about sports a while, as you know.
It's nice to talk about sports a little bit, though.
Also excited that basketball almost back.
Basketball, we're in the preseason.
Wait, which we're not doing a bubble for that, though.
I don't think so. I think they're done with it. The bubble was maybe a desperation play to get in like the rest of the season, but for the whole thing,
yeah,
I don't know.
Classy move. My wife was telling me about the whole JJ Barea thing. You know, that is like the Dallas Mavs signed him, but then released him so that like they guaranteed him like money and a chance. And so
a chance to play somewhere else because there wasn't room for him anymore on the Mavs, but he made such a huge impact for the Mavs.
Yeah.
Both as a player and as like leadership on the bench and just he was like Tiny Dirk, like like just really part of the culture.
11 of 13 seasons he's played for the Mavs. Which there is a question somebody is submitting. They told me they're going to about kind of like loyalty in sports. So I look forward to talking about that later in our question edition of our podcast, which if our listeners don't know about, every Friday comes out an episode with questions. You, the listeners, write in different questions from, I know there's a question coming, you know, about the college football playoff somebody wrote in, and then there's questions about, you know, deep stuff like, you know, what should we believe as Catholics on this topic, or I'm really struggling with this. So whatever's on your mind, whatever affirmations you want to give us, please, especially me. Most of you affirm Father Paul, which is fine, but if you want to toss one my way, that would be great. So I wanted to talk today about something that we've gotten questions about, and I think presents to be a big issue around the holidays, which is loneliness. I know this is something prevalent right now with our teenagers. Obviously, my main role here at the parish is Director of Youth Ministry. I'm the interim director with Children's Ministry. And I know a lot of people blame technology for being one of the instruments of loneliness, and I definitely see that. But I also just think our society are very lonely people. And we've had questions before on the podcast. I think I just saw another one recently pop up, like, what do I do with loneliness? And now we're in the season where I feel like it really rears its ugly head, you know? Like, you get, especially people that are struggling with loneliness, you add a holiday on top of it, combined with a pandemic, where maybe they were already going to be lonely this holiday season. And then the pandemic, and it's like, what do we do with loneliness? How do we unite ourselves to Christ during that time, you know? And the thing about the topic is, it's not just like, a loneliness applies to all of us, whether it was like vocationally we're lonely, right? Somebody's like, well, I haven't met my spouse, or I don't know what I'm doing, you know, I want to join a religious order. Or second is like, oh, they're just lonely because they have no friends, you know, maybe they've had a huge conversion in life and lost all their friends, or just moved to a new place, or maybe they just are struggling with depression and loneliness, you know. There are so many of us in different ways that struggle with this topic, and I would just love to give some practicals today. What does the church encourage? What do we encourage somebody who's struggling with loneliness to do? So initial thoughts?
Yeah. Very, very important and timely topic. But it's also kind of a timeless topic. Like, it is particularly, you know, important right now, but it's also something that's just always kind of been with us.
Yeah.
And my first reaction to this is like, I don't know, the more I studied philosophy, and I guess the longer I've been a seminarian and a priest and just kind of an observer of people and of human nature, because that's part of what being a priest like entails. I get to meet a ton of people, and I can start to, I don't know, maybe see some patterns in there that I wouldn't if I wasn't in such a public position. But this is something that's been part of philosophy for a long time, since Aristotle at least, like that we are made for society, that we're social, we're political in the sense of being social, that we are social animals. We're rational social animals. I remember, this is kind of a weird story, but I remember when I was much younger, we had 2 gerbils. Did you ever have like hamsters or gerbils?
Guinea
or
pigs.
Anything? Guinea pigs? Okay. Gerbils are like small guinea pigs.
I was going to
with
say,
tails.
what's the difference between a gerbil and a hamster and a guinea? I don't know.
Guinea pigs are big, or bigger. Hamsters don't have tails, but are kind of gerbil
I don't
size.
think my guinea pig had a tail.
Yeah, they don't have tails either.
Okay, I was like,
Gerbils have tails.
oh, okay, gerbils have tails.
They
Like
look
rat-like?
more, like a mouse tail more.
Okay.
Like it's got hair on it and stuff. But
They're
they're bigger. They're bigger than mice, but smaller than guinea pigs. They're nice little pets.
There you
We
go.
had
What
2
were
of
their
them.
names?
Andy and something. I don't remember the other one. Yeah, I don't remember. But
Nice.
so I mean, this isn't like the happiest story, but one of them died eventually, and we thought like, okay, we'll just keep one gerbil, and that one, like everything about it was just messed up when the other one died, because gerbils are intensely social animals. They're the kind of animals that need community.
Yeah.
And that without that just cannot survive. So like that other gerbil didn't last too long.
Right.
But you could tell it was so strikingly obvious, like what a difference community made. And I think because we're rational, we can forget that we're also animals,
Right.
and have like instinctual reactions and sort of base level needs for certain things. Like I don't know, water, for instance, right? Other animals know when they're thirsty, and if there's water around, they drink. I've heard that like low level dehydration is kind of a norm amongst human beings in America anyway. I know it is in the circles I run in. People are just like always a little dehydrated.
Oh, constantly.
And it's like, why do we do that? Because we ignore this sort of base level instinct that I'm thirsty right now. And we're like, nah, I'll deal with it later.
I mean, side tangent, how many ounces of water do you try to drink a day?
I am not good at
As
counting.
he reaches for his
as I reach
Bucky's
for
cup.
my
32-ounce cup. How many of those do you try to go through?
I have no idea.
Okay. I am lucky if I drink 1 glass of water a day. Is that enough? I hear that's not enough.
I've heard that's not enough as well.
I mean, 6 cups of coffee, but...
There's water in coffee.
Yeah, right?
But
That's
also
what I'm
coffee
saying.
dehydrates you. So.
Okay, well, there
Anyway,
you go.
so we digress. But my point here is like, it's the same kind of thing with community. Like, we need community. Human beings need community, and we can convince ourselves sometimes that we don't, and we've just got it. And we don't notice the signs sometimes about how much we need community. And I know it's easier said than done just to like find community, but I don't think we take it seriously enough how much we need real community.
Yep.
In-person community, how much we need that.
Yeah.
And so I think we've all experienced that during the pandemic, having to do things digitally and seeing like this isn't the same. It doesn't work quite as well just to be on Zoom all the time.
Yeah.
Even like instead of going into work, people who have to work from home and stuff like that. So that's my first basic point. Like, when thinking about loneliness and specifically loneliness in this time and holiday loneliness, like we have to keep in mind that we are made for community, and that there's not a whole lot that can really substitute for that.
Yeah.
So where am I going with that? We are made in the image and likeness of God, who himself is community. And we're also made for God. Like there's other things which go beyond us just being, like the other animals.
Right.
That we need. And because God is himself like perfect community and desires to be in relation with us, it means, and is all powerful and all loving, which is a relational term, right?
Yeah.
It means that we can always turn to God, not as how to put it, not exactly as just a replacement for human community, but like when we're not able to experience human community, we can especially turn to God in those times.
Right.
And know that like his grace is sufficient for us, that he can sustain us, even when there aren't kind of normal conditions.
Right.
Like think of the saints, some of these stories about the saints, like St. Catherine of Siena, who survived only on the Eucharist for years, I think.
Yeah.
And some of these like desert fathers who fasted in these incredible ways, that's not a normal way to live.
Right.
You're missing something that's vital. But God, through his grace, can sustain us in those extraordinary times.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the conclusion to this first point, is like, if you are able to have community, do not underestimate how much you need that community. If you're not able to have community because of the pandemic, then do not underestimate like the power of God's grace to sustain you in that. But that doesn't mean that we can choose not to be in community.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard. Okay, so what kind of community? Like,
which we have an episode on community and joining groups and different things like that.
Yeah, we do.
So
yeah. So take it back to loneliness specifically then.
So one point I wanted to bring up, and I think it's good that's often brought up about this. I know I bring it up as a youth minister, like also your point on it. I know we definitely, as clergy, ministers, different people, we encourage uniting the struggle of loneliness with that Christ suffered loneliness himself. So uniting into Christ. I have this quote from one of the Catholic News Agency articles that I remember a long time ago reading about, and it just popped up, but it said, some theologians have said that Christ's loneliness upon the cross outweighed even his physical agonies. Lessons derived from Christ's loneliness, both his loneliness in the Garden of Gethsemane, which St. Thomas More wrote about, and upon the cross, in the tradition of Jesus' last 7 words on the cross, drawn from all 4 Gospels, can help us unite our sufferings from loneliness to his. So I wanted to deal with that point because I think it's huge and I think it's important, but so often a cop-out in the sense that we'll hear, well, kind of like the offer it up. Unite yourself to Christ with this. Christ went through this. You can. What does that mean? To the average person, if you were to say that to them, like, Christ suffered in this way, so are you. You can unite this and know that you have, commonality with Christ in this suffering. What are you really encouraging somebody to do that you're telling them?
We're telling them to actually make a priestly act, which is to offer a sacrifice. So that's what priests do, and by our baptism, we are all priests.
Priest, prophet, and king at our
baptism. Priest, prophet, and king, right? And the sacrifice that we offer is the sacrifice of ourself. It's our own will and intellect and emotions and everything that makes ourself. That's what we can offer in our baptismal priesthood. And so when we say offer it up, we are using like intentionally a kind of like some priestly imagery there. Offer it up, bring the offering to the altar of yourself, and offer yourself to God. That's the first part. But then, we don't just say offer it up. We'll say take it to the cross or something.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I'm not just doing this on my own strength. I'm doing this in imitation and also in participation with the self-offering of Christ the high priest on the cross.
Right.
And now suffering is meaningless in and of itself, right? It's actually evil is an absence of meaning that should be there. You can see this with like physical evil. I think Augustine gave the example of a horse that was missing a leg. Like that's an evil thing in the sense that it's a deprivation of some good that should be there.
Right.
Well, suffering is an evil, and it's a deprivation of some meaning or some good that should be there.
Right.
Suffering is meaningless in and of itself, but Christ, through his sacrifice, makes suffering have meaning. And not just meaning, but salvific meaning.
Yeah, redeemed it.
He redeems it. And so he gives us the ability, when we offer ourselves, our will, in union with his, thy will be done, like the Our Father, or like the agony in the garden, the words that Christ himself said. When we make that offering of our will to God, like our suffering does take on salvific significance.
Yeah.
And actual meaning. It becomes something meritorious, to go back to our discussion from last week.
Right.
Not of our own strength, but because now it's joined to Christ's infinitely meritorious sacrifice.
Yeah.
And
it's not easy. It's not easy to do.
No, it's not easy.
But I do feel a lot of people will toss it out to just be like, well, just do that. Like, like offer it up, unite yourself to Christ. Like,
it goes back to that episode of people struggling to deal with suffering or with pain or how to like console somebody who's doing that.
Because there's a type of grieving.
Yeah. So Christ's loneliness, you mentioned St. Thomas More, who wrote a really incredible book called, it's just called like The Agony, right? The Agony in the Garden or something?
I thought it was, I'm not sure on the exact title, but I remember we had to read it in one of our classes, and I remembered specifically reading about the agony in the garden, and pretty powerful.
He wrote it while he was himself in the Tower of London. I know that. And I remember I read it in seminary during Lent one year, and just a really beautiful, powerful book. There's also one of the places that comes to mind when we think about the loneliness of Christ. Like, yes, on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Right, his words. And the mystery of Christ being able to say those words, who is himself God. But another place that I think of is St. Peter in Gallicantu in Jerusalem. Gallicantu is like the Italian kind of Latinish word for the cock crow. And this is the place traditionally held where Peter denied Christ 3 times. And it's also the house of Caiaphas, where Christ was held from Holy Thursday evening after his betrayal in the garden until the crucifixion, or until he was taken to Pilate the next day. And so it's where Christ spent the night, and they have this pit there. And as with a lot of archaeological things, like the actual historical significance can sometimes be hard to tease out, but they use this term "shelters the memory" when I was doing a lot of archaeology there. Like this place really shelters the memory of Christ spending that night alone in prison, waiting to be condemned the next morning. And something, when you go down into sort of that pit under the church, they have a book there with Psalm 88 in a ton of different languages. That's a psalm that priests will pray, or people who pray the Liturgy of the Hours will pray Friday night for night prayer.
Right.
Psalm 88 is one of those sort of psalms of lament, but when you read it through the lens of Christ's loneliness, that night after being betrayed by one of his closest friends and disciples, it really takes on some powerful meaning. And I bring that up not just so that we can be like impressed or moved to awe, but like doing those kind of things can help us unite our own loneliness and suffering to that of Christ. Like reading this psalm and praying with that psalm, or with was it Psalm 22 that has "My God, why have you forsaken me?" There's another one too, like 40 something that has those words, I think. But like by praying those psalms, it can really help us make that act of the will, which is difficult to make, of sort of offering this sacrifice in surrender to God. Not my will, but yours be done.
Right. So far we've talked about, desiring that community, looking into that, uniting ourselves to Christ and his suffering. I want to toss out one other practical too, and you may have already done this if you're suffering with loneliness. I think about it sometimes often with my daughter, Francesca. She is kind of entering a shy phase where I'll say, why don't you go ask this person, or why don't you introduce yourself, right? And she'll be really shy, not want to talk, not want to say anything, and it takes some time of warming up. And I share that story in the sense that this somebody who's struggling with loneliness may have already done this, but it does cost a little bit of yourself, of putting yourself out on a limb to like say, I need this. I want to kind of invite myself into this community, or to hang out with this people, or to reach out. Yeah. And they may say no, and we have to be okay with that answer. Mm-hmm. But to also just be like, well, you don't know if you don't ask, right? Because we're saying unite yourself to Christ, seek out community if you can. It's so important. It's needed. We desire it. But you also got to give it a shot. You got to try to. And if one group doesn't work, that's okay. Go to a different group. Go to another group, ask somebody else. So I wanted to toss out that and the power of prayer. I mean, we always talk about it, but I would invite you to ask people that you trust. I don't know, ask your church, ask us to pray for you. Mm-hmm. If that is something that you're really struggling with, like that is the role. We're called to pray for one another, and I don't know. I just wanted to toss out that before. There is a book called The Sadness of Christ. Was that
That's it?
Yeah, that's what
Yeah, it's got a subtitle about the agony or something.
Yeah.
The Sadness of Christ. That's the St. Thomas More book.
Yeah.
Which I found that book really powerful.
Yeah, I remember it being pretty profound. I can't remember if it was in my Theology of Christ class or another one, but I remember we had to read some excerpts from it, and it was good.
Theology of Christ, huh?
Yeah.
It's not just called Christology?
No. No.
All right.
Well, I mean, you could call it Christology, but literally the course descriptive is Theology of Christ. So
yeah, I'm sure you could tease those into actually being distinct things.
Yeah. Well, because it was paired with, you have to take your sophomore year Theology of Christ one semester and Theology of Church another semester.
Ecclesiology.
So I guess some people would call it that too, but potato, tomato, tomato.
Those are actually the same word.
Orange, right? Things like that.
Yeah,
so
fair enough.
Anyway, hey, we haven't done it in a while. Reading, watching, thinking.
Nice. We haven't done that.
We haven't done this in a while.
Okay.
I'll start to give you a chance to think.
All right.
Because I know you like to think it over, be a little pensive. Yeah. So, I am watching the West Wing. I started. Okay,
Oh, really?
so this is going to be a tough endeavor because I just found out. I just started it and found out it's going off Netflix on January 1st. So I did some quick calculations.
Aren't there like 80 seasons of it?
Not 80. That would be a lot. But there are 154 episodes. So I did some quick math, about 42 minutes each episode, 154, how many days I have left. So I would just need to average about 4.5 hours a day of watching The West Wing before January 1st. Don't think I'm going to get there because of that whole, in case you don't know, NBC is starting their own streaming service called The Peacock.
Okay.
And so they're removing shows like The Office, West
NBC
Wing,
shows.
NBC shows onto the Peacock, so that you have to pay another subscription service and all that. We can talk about the scam of subscription services another time. But anyway, so I started that. I'm intrigued. I always have been intrigued by politics, and so. I like watching those shows and just seeing, how things worked and whatnot.
Behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes.
Intrigue, political intrigue.
Yeah. So
machinations.
Reading. I just started the Pope's new encyclical.
Fratelli Tutti?
Yep. The Tutti.
Yeah.
As I like to call it.
It's a long and
the Big Toot.
Okay.
I don't call it the Big Toot, but that would be cool. And and then I'm going to watch Notre Dame play Clemson for the ACC championship this Saturday. That's going to be big.
Wow. Okay.
That's huge.
That is huge.
Come on, go Irish.
Man. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And so watching Thinking.
Wow.
Oh, and Thinking is I don't know. I'm thinking about a lot of things these days. When the days are shorter and the nights are longer, it gets me pretty pensive, pretty thinking,
Yeah.
So go ahead, you're up.
All right. Watched some golf this weekend, just a little bit. Watched actually the LPGA U.S. Open was in Houston.
All right.
And they had basically the same weather we had here yesterday, which was like rainy and cold. So that was kind of cool. They actually got moved to Monday to finish. I haven't watched LPGA golf since I was in high school, and just like watching the Golf Channel, just obsessively. Anything golf was enough.
And I know this sounds sexist, but would you say most people on the LPGA tour would be able to beat you?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right.
I can outdrive them, but
the finesse game
me.
and all that. Yeah. That's what I figured. I just thought I'd ask.
Well, no, it is different than like basketball in that sense, right? Or like some more physical sport, football.
Right.
Yeah. No, I was watching them and thinking like, oh man, you just hit it 215 off the tee. Like I can do that with my driving iron, and then being like, yep, but I can't hit any of those other shots that you did.
Yeah, or like put a 25-footer in and just,
and like, hey, look at me. I just made triple. When's the last time you've made a triple on a hole? Like,
right.
So anyway, watching some of that, not a whole lot, but it was enough to just be golf.
Right.
Reading. This is a book that I thought about bringing up just now in this discussion, but it wasn't specifically on loneliness, so I didn't. But it's been a while since I read it, but it's called The Catholic Guide to Depression. And
I think I did see that in one of the articles when I was preparing for it.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't know if it was good or not, though.
It's great.
Okay.
It's co-authored. I forget who the psychologist. There's a priest who was one of my teachers, Monsignor John Syack. He co-authored it from the perspective of like theology and priestly experience, and then there's a psychologist who co-authored it from that perspective. And
is this Kevin Vost?
No, I don't think so.
Catholic Guide to Loneliness, did you say?
No, Catholic.
Sorry.
Catholic Guide to Depression.
To Depression. Okay.
I didn't know
keep
there
going.
was one to loneliness, and I have read things by Kevin Vost. He wrote a nice little book on memory.
Okay.
He's quite good too. He's very accessible.
Yeah, he has one you can buy from Target.
Oh, Target.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Kevin Vost, I've read stuff before about him. So Catholic Guide to Loneliness is something that I could recommend without having seen it. I know it's going to be good because the things I've read by him were good, and they were very easy to read and accessible, but also had depth. Catholic Guide to Depression.
Yeah, with Father John.
Yeah, John Sayak.
And then Aaron Kahirati.
Yeah,
MD.
Yeah, I don't know that guy, but I was.
Yeah.
Father or Monsignor John Sayak was one of my teachers.
Awesome.
And I remember reading that book and thinking, like, I wish this were a resource, because depression on many different levels, like full clinical and then like different gradations of depression, are so prevalent in our society, in large part, in some part, because of the isolating effect of technology and just the isolating nature of Western society, right? There's few intergenerational households. People move around. They're transient.
Yeah.
Values are not particularly family oriented. All these things. So anyway, so depression is prevalent. It's something a lot of people struggle with, and I just remember reading this and thinking, like, I wish people knew about this and I could promo it at some point. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm doing.
Promo.
Boom. And then what am I thinking? I have to lead a retreat early in the next year for some people, and I'm thinking
that was very. I have to lead a retreat for some people.
Generic.
Yeah.
But yeah, just thinking about some topics. I really think, like,
you should do loneliness. How about I just toss out some random topics?
Yeah, thanks, man.
Natural family planning.
So just list them off. No, I've got a topic, and I'm trying to tease it out to see, like, which direction to take it. But
nice.
Yeah, thinking about just retreats in general.
To draw back, to retreat.
Yeah, or to give yourself another treat.
That's not what it
means.
The Christmas season, right? Well, that was fun. Hey, seriously, anybody struggling with loneliness, we would love to pray for you. On behalf of Joey Scansella, Father Paul Bechter, take care.
God bless.